Probably the most useful tool in my garage is my miter saw. I've made a lot of projects, including a table and benches and all sorts of things, only using one tool, and that is my miter saw. A miter saw is an extremely useful tool and should be probably the first thing you buy for your workshop if you're planning on doing any builds. So I'm just going to show you a little bit about the parts of a miter saw, what you do, and how you make those cuts. Okay, so you want to get a miter saw. Miter saws come in. This is a pretty standard $150 Cobalt miter saw, 7.5 inch blade. They come all the way into $400 saw ranges that have 12 inch blades and long extension pieces, but this is pretty basic and all you really need if you're just doing small projects. Two things to consider when you're getting a miter saw. Make sure that it slides so that you can do wider cuts, and also make sure that it both bevels and miters. So what that means is the miter part of a saw is you can change the angle on a flat piece of wood that it cuts, or bevel, which is when your saw cuts at an angle like this. So you want to be able to have both flexibilities depending on the type of wood you're cutting, depending on what your project is, so you can bevel, miter, or bevel and miter at the same time. Alright, so when you want to make a standard straight cut with a miter saw, make sure you measure and draw a line on your piece of wood, and know that when you're going to do this, your miter saw itself will take out about 1/8 of an inch. So if you want your board to be a certain length, make sure you line up your saw blade slightly on the outside of your mark so that your board will be the right length that you want. So once you have that lined up, simply cut it on based on the user instructions and go. Now, this was a 12 inch piece of wood. Exactly 12 inches because I cut it on the outside of the mark. So that's how you make a standard straight cut. Okay, so we showed you how to do straight cuts, real simple. Here's a mitered cut. So there's a number of different angles you can set it at depending on what you're doing. If you're doing crown molding, you need a lot of these different settings on here. Depending on what you're cutting, but if you're just trying to cut something that's going to come together at a right angle, the easiest thing to do on a miter is just do a 45-degree cut, because then it's going to come together and make 40. So you set your saw by adjusting it over to the 45-degree angle, putting your board up against the back fence, lining up your saw with the back corner of your wood, and then running it. Now you see a perfect 45-degree angle cut. If this were a longer piece of wood, it would match up perfectly right there, and you'd have a 45-degree angle.